Hello and welcome back to another STEM lesson. This week we're going to be talking about energy flow and plant and water cycles. Have you heard of a food chain? A food chain traces the energy of nutrients through the organisms that eat them. This includes the production of vegetables, fruit, cheese, eggs, or meat that you had for breakfast or will have for lunch or dinner. Energy is in all of this food. Now, where does the energy in the food come from? The energy starts from the sun. Starting with the sun providing nutrients to producers, which use photosynthesis to become food for the consumers. A producer is an organism that is capable of making its own food, usually through photosynthesis, such as a plant. Now, a consumer is any organism that gets its food by eating producers and other organisms. A food web is what happens when one organism gets energy from more than one source, such as a human eating vegetables, ham, and cheese. Now, how do we use the energy that is in the food that we eat? We need energy to move, keep warm, grow, think, stay healthy, and stay alive. Any energy that is left is stored inside of our bodies. Only a fraction of the energy that an herbivore, or a plant eater, gets from the plant food that it eats becomes a part of its body. The rest of the energy from the plant food is lost as waste or is used up for movement, keeping warm, or just surviving. The same goes for carnivores who eat meat and omnivores that eat meat and plants. When a carnivore or an omnivore eats another animal, only a fraction of the energy from its animal food is incorporated back into its body. Energy is lost at each link in the food chain because the living things pass on much less energy than they receive. This energy loss means that most food chains are only 4 or 5 links long. Discarded plant and animal materials eventually decompose, returning energy into the form of nutrients to the soil. The food chain alone is not responsible for the survival of plants and animals and humans. It is important to recognize that other nutrients such as carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, and water also play a part in maintaining the ecosystems in which the living organisms of the world depend. Just as energy flows through organisms and the environment, these other nutrients also flow through the biosphere in cycles. For example, part of the water cycle includes the water evaporating from the rivers and oceans into the atmosphere, where it builds up in clouds or condenses, and it returns to the ground as rain or snow, also called precipitation. Numerous cycles contribute to the energy and nutrient flow that naturally occurs in various ecosystems in Earth's biosphere to sustain life and maintain a balance between plants and animals. First, let's talk about the water cycle, or the hydraulic cycle. The hydraulic cycle identifies the flow of water, a necessary resource for life, in a cyclic fashion. In the water cycle, water transpires from plants and trees and evaporates from bodies of water and soils. Then it returns to the earth by precipitation. The hydraulic cycle is an important part of the food chain and is useful to consider in conjunction with the food web because animals and plants cannot survive without water. Another important nutrient cycle is the carbon cycle. The plants and trees take in carbon dioxide and release only oxygen. Their decomposition then releases the carbon back into the soil and the atmosphere. Carbon is also released to the atmosphere in the form of carbon dioxide by combustion of fossil fuels for transportation, power, and industrial processes. Carbon fixation and circulation is important because it's a building block of life and is elemental to the physical mass of all living things. which are composed in some portion of carbon. This cycle occurs between the water and atmosphere as well as between terrestrial plants and trees and the atmosphere. Now last we have the nitrogen cycle. The nitrogen cycle is another major nutrient cycle in Earth's biosphere. Nitrogen is a gas taken in by biota, plants and trees through respiration and is released back into the soil. Some nitrogen form nitrate in soils and some is released into the atmosphere as nitrogen gas. Nitrogen is a life-supporting nutrient and is a primary ingredient in fertilizers, which is applied for agricultural purposes. Agricultural runoff also doses the soil with nitrogen. In addition, any consumer that ingests plants, vegetables, or other organic material that has been involved in the nitrogen absorption releases nitrogen in its own waste in the form of urea. Herbivores and omnivores are the primary sources of this form of nitrogen. Now thank you for joining us, and please come on down and pick up this week's craft, which will be forming the water cycle and the food cycle. Thank you and have a great day.